Turkeys are going ham this morning. There he is. So I'm using a Bobby Garland. I think this is like speckled shad. I have to look at the bag again. It's a nice fish though. Know where he's going. Ooh. A little slimy Hagar going on there. I don't think he's coming back though. A lot of my friends ask me why I get up so freaking early in the morning to do this. And it's not really that the bite's that much better early in the morning in my experience, but I mean, look at this. This is just gorgeous. Yeah, it sucks having to get up early, but there's just something peaceful about coming out here at daybreak and hearing the wildlife, all the nature. And the fish are just an added bonus. Yeah, you heard me, didn't you? You heard me. Oopsie. Well, top of the morning to y'all. Welcome to another episode of Brent Allen Outdoors. My name is Brent Allen, and today I'm going to teach you guys how to vertical jig. And so what I'm using today is my 11-foot ACC rear cedar jigging rod. And you can use a simple cane pole. B&M poles are super popular. Ozark rods. There's a whole line of different jigging rods that you can go out there and get. But you don't need anything fancy. If you want to use just a cane pole, that will do the trick. And then so the next thing you're going to need is, of course, a jig to tie on. Now you can use plastics, you can use hair jigs. I have videos using both, as you guys can go back and watch. As you can see, I have a handful of different color hair jigs when I'm in the mood to use those. Today I'm primarily using just a standard lead weight jig head with a sickle hook on it. These are all 16th ounce jig heads. Now, if I want a slower presentation, I will drop down to maybe a 32nd ounce weight, which would look more like this. You can see the jig head is slightly smaller. And then the last thing you want is the plastic if you're going to go the plastic route. Today, I am using these Bobby Garland baby shad crystal baits. And I actually was in Walmart killing time the other night, and I saw these. I was like, you know what? That looks pretty dang good. So I scooped up a bag of these, and I might dabble with these as well. This was another one I picked up the other night. This is the Bobby Garland Cajun Cricket. These things just looked fantastic, and I know this color will do good in the river where I'm at. So now that we've gone over the rod and the bait, let's get into actually vertical jigging. Let's go. So this is a glimpse of what I'm fishing today. And not just this spot, there's going to be a lot of other areas that look as dense as this in terms of vegetation. But this is the kind of heavy cover that I'm going to be focusing on because we're into spring right now. So the spawn is, you know, in full swing. So these fish are going to be held up in shallower cover, you know, laying their eggs on the fallen down weeds underneath. So that's what I'm going to be focusing my attention on. And this is prime vertical jigging real estate. All right, guys, so here we are. I have my 11-foot jigging rod. I have my plastic tied on, so I'm ready to go. So at this point, what I'm going to be doing is focusing along small pockets along the edges of this dollar grass, in between lily pads. You basically just kind of want to focus on every little nook and cranny that you can, because that's where these specks are going to be held up. And the main technique for vertical jigging is simple. What you do is when you bring your bait down into the water, you're gonna bump that jig on the fall. So as you drop it down, just give it a bump. Drop it down, give it a bump. Drop it down, give it a bump. Bring it back up. Same thing over again. Drop it down, give it a bump. Down again, give it another bump. Bring it back up. That is honestly the main basic technique for vertical jigging. Now I get people on my boat when I'm trying to teach them, and they're, you know, getting in this stuff and they're going crazy with up and down nonstop, super aggressive, erratic movements. And, you know, just keep in mind the fish are going to see that, and they're going to know that's not a natural bait. So I always say just be slow and methodical with your jigging. The more erratic that you are, I'm not saying that you won't catch fish if you're erratic with it, but 9 times out of 10, if you're just kind of slower and methodical, you're going to get more strikes. And the next thing to keep in mind when you're vertical jigging, especially for crappie, is crappie are vertical feeders. So they're always going to be feeding upwards. So you never want to be staying on the bottom with your jig. You always want to have that jig suspended. Now, how deep you actually suspend that bait will depend on how deep the body of water you're fishing is. So here in Central Florida, we have a bunch of lakes and rivers that are relatively shallow. So like all this stuff here that I'm fishing, this is going to be about, you know, 4.5, 5 foot, 6 to 7 foot in certain areas. So, you know, this isn't very deep. So, you know, you can see my line out here, I probably only have about 1 foot, maybe 1.5 foot. So that way I know that bait's always going to be suspended. So if you're somewhere where the body of water you're fishing is like 50, 60 feet deep and you're fishing structure, fallen timber, it probably makes more sense for you to get an actual reel. But in my case here where I'm at, I'm not fishing super deep. So when I hook into these fish, all I got to do is yank it up, flip it in the boat. I'm not reeling anything. So what I'm going to do is just kind of use my trolling motor here. And if you don't have a trolling motor, that's okay. You can kind of just anchor up as you go around. But I'm just using my trolling motor to skirt through this vegetation and just pick my pockets and just kind of methodically jig through it all. So here we go again. Just a little edge over here. Kind of bumping that jig a little bit. This is traditional vertical jigging. Nothing really fancy, but I am going to show you guys some other tips and techniques throughout the way. There's a lot of lily pad stems through here without the lily pads on top. So that all is still really good structure to jig around. So you can see I'm just moving from pocket to pocket here, and they can be 6 inches apart, 1 foot apart. There's no real rule to it. I've caught fish right next to where I've caught another fish. And that's kind of the beauty about vertical jigging. You know, everyone has their own techniques. You know, there's a standard procedure for doing it, like what I'm teaching you here. But as you do it more and more, you develop your own techniques and rhythms. So, you know, don't ever beat yourself up if you're trying to learn this, you're not catching fish. This stuff takes time. You know, it's not something you can just jump in and start bailing in fish. You know, you still have to spend the time, locate where the fish are at, you know, find the right color baits that work for your body of water. I mean, it's time consuming stuff, but that's fishing. And then it makes catching fish that much more rewarding when you put in your time and, you know, do your research. Just look at that view right there. You just can't beat it. And so I do try to, like, if I'm skirting the edge of something like this, I do try to stay off of it as much as I can. And that's where a longer jigging rod comes in handy, because that way you're not spooking the fish as much. The fish here really aren't as spooky as some other lakes I've fished, so I don't have that problem too much. But it's still just nice to have some distance between you and the fish. And so a question that I get a lot on my videos is, how long do I stay in one particular pocket? And the answer to that, really, it varies. I guess on average, I'll stay in one pocket anywhere from 30 seconds to 60 seconds. But sometimes I'm a little more impatient and I'll kind of bounce around a little bit more frequently. The next technique of vertical jigging I'm going to share with you guys is called swimming the jig. Now, maybe some guys will argue with me about this, but to me, this is just another form of vertical jigging, because you're still vertical jigging, you're just swimming the jig. So what I do, and this is most easy with a trolling motor in my opinion, but you can do it stationary as well. But as I'm skirting along these edges of the vegetation, I'm just jigging like normal, but you can see my jig is swimming alongside of all the vegetation. And I do this a lot in the early season, like in fall, because that's when these fish are really coming in and out of the deeper water. So it's really effective in the early seasons. But that may vary depending on where you're fishing. But this is a nice method to kind of just cruise and scout a lot of area if you're trying to figure fish out. That's a good way to cover a lot of ground. So this spot here is actually quite a bit more shallow. So I'm leaving my rod tip further up to compensate for the depth. And I know I make it look easy in my videos because I clip together all the catches like that. But this stuff, it takes time, patience, just like any other kind of fishing. So what's going to happen is when you're doing this, whether it's on the drop or whatever, when they slam that jig, all you have to do is lift your rod up, and that's how you set your hook. Because what these fish do when they're vertical feeding like that, they extend their bottom jaw and they suck that jig down. So when they slam it, you know it. So all you got to do is just lift that rod up real quick and set the hook like that, and then flip that fish in the boat. So what I'll most typically do is I'll do a combination of swimming the jig as well as just stationary vertical jigging. I'll bounce between those two techniques all day long. You know, it just depends on the cover that I'm fishing, how hard the wind's blowing. You know, there's just a lot of different elements to consider when you're jigging like this. So right here, you see I'm just swimming the jig along the side of this. Just bringing it down, bumping it. Raise it up, bump it, lower it down. You know, this isn't real rocket science here. I mean, you're really just trying to make that bait look as natural as possible to these fish. Ooh. Oh man, missed him. That's what I mean, just a split second. When they suck that jig down, they got power behind it, and that's what makes this so fun. Is, you know, you hear me talking about, you know, it's the thump that keeps you addicted to this kind of fishing, and that's 100% what it is. And don't get me wrong, I love minnow fishing. That's how I was raised, fishing for these specks. But once I got introduced to this, and I really got into my rhythm of doing it my own way, man, there's just nothing like it. I will do this over minnow fishing all day long. As you can see, there's a little pocket right there. So I'm just gonna kind of reach over and drop it down in there. Sometimes someone will be home, sometimes they won't. just the nature of fishing. And I've noticed when I'm swimming the jig like this, when they hit it, they're usually more aggressive when they hit. And I think that's because they're coming out from that heavy cover once they see it and they're like, ah, I'm gonna get that thing. So they got a little more oomph behind their strike, as opposed to, you know, dropping it on top of their head and just waiting for them to suck it down. That's my thinking anyway. I don't know the actual science behind that, but sounds right, doesn't it? I'm just swimming along. And again, you want to keep that bait off the bottom. You don't want to be sitting on the bottom when you're doing this. Otherwise, you're never going to catch a fish. I mean, you'll probably catch a mudfish, maybe a bass or something, but you will not catch specks. There he is. Yep. Yeah, he's a little small. I am keeping him today, but that's a little too small for my liking. Prefer to have some meat on them bones, you know what I'm saying? When I start getting into vegetation that has a lot more pockets for me to, you know, dip this jig into, then I'll do more of the traditional, just straight up and down vertical jigging. But this stuff right here, it's, you can see it's pretty thick. And I could pull holes in it, which I'll get into a little bit later. Also, I can tell, like, once these grass lines are pretty close to the edge, it's super shallow. So even if I try to pull a hole right here, it really wouldn't be that deep. So I'd mostly be wasting my time. And that's all stuff that you just learn as you get out and do it. You guys see me use this technique a lot. So this shouldn't be anything new if you've been watching my videos for some time. But today I wanted to talk about it in more detail so you guys get a better understanding of what I'm doing. Yeah, there we go. That's a little bit better fish there. Yep, he'll keep. He was just along that edge there. Swimming the jig is freaking deadly. We're 2 days before the full moon right now, so the bite should be pretty decent. Oh yeah, that's a nice one there. Yeah, that's a lot nicer fish. Yep. Probably 10 and a half, 11 right there. Nice fish. And so what will happen over time as you catch fish, just like this last one, you know, he pulled that plastic off of the jig head a little bit. So nothing really to, you can just kind of push it back on. What will end up happening is after, you know, 2 or 3 more fish, maybe even the next fish, it'll rip the plastic too much for me to reuse it. And at that point, I'll just put a new plastic on. But a lot of guys will use super glue to help hold the plastic on the jig head. You know, that's nothing new. That's, people have been doing that for a long time, but I've never done it myself. I'm sure it probably works pretty decent, but it's just one more thing to do, and I don't know. It's just, I don't have a problem with spending an extra second putting on a new plastic, so. To each their own, but that is a technique that you can do at home. A little pocket back in here. I don't know if you guys can see that, but you're really just looking for any opportunity to get that jig in some dense cover. And as you do this, you'll learn what you get hung up in and you don't want to drop the jig into, and what's just good opportunity and good depth below. There's another pocket back here. Oh man, he was in there. That was a different nibble. So I could stay in that hole and jig it for a while, and I'll probably be able to pull that fish out, but I mean, there's no guarantee. And there are certain fishermen like my dad who will sit on a spot all day long. I learned a lot of fishing technique from my dad, but we are still two very different fishermen, and that's okay. You know, we both catch a lot of fish, and that's something to always keep in mind. You know, you don't ever have to be the same as someone you're watching online, or, you know, a pro, anything like that. Just develop your own technique, whatever you're comfortable with. As long as you're catching fish, that's what matters. So don't ever think you have to do exactly what I do or anyone else you see online. Use the tips that we give you, and then put them into action, then develop your own variation of it. That's exactly what I did, and I think most people do as well. Yep, there he is. Yeah, so here's a good example. Look at that fish. He woofed it down. Woofed it down. So this calls for a little bit of unHOOKum action. If you guys ain't got yourself one of these tools, what are you waiting on? unHOOKum.com. No brainer. Nice fish. Alright, so there's a pocket right underneath this lily pad here. And so this next technique I'm gonna show you, I call it feathering the line, but this only works if you are using a jigging rod with some sort of reel. If you're using a cane pole, you cannot do this technique. But this is especially handy when you're fishing really dense cover and you're really trying to get into those hard to reach areas. So basically what you're gonna do, you see the end of my rod, you see my jig hanging down there. What I do is I take my left hand, or your right hand, depending on what hand you fish with, but you take that line in your other hand and you pull it out, and as you can see, the jig comes up to the rod tip, and when I let slack down, it drops back down. Pretty basic. So what you want to do is, when you want to get into that hard to reach spot, you just take that line, bring the jig up to the tip of the rod. And so we're going to use this little pocket right here as an example. So all I'm going to do is get right over it and then drop my jig down. And as you can see, I'm still holding my line, and this allows me to control the depth of the jig. So I'm pretty shallow right now. I can completely let it go. And just vertical jig like normal. All right. And when you're ready to come back out, like right now I could just pull it out, but for the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to take my hand, bring that jig back up to my rod tip, and then pull out. And sometimes, like right here, you know, I dropped it into that main pocket there, but I can kind of swim it around the lily pad a little bit. So if you get an opportunity to swim that jig in any particular pocket, go ahead and do it. It's only going to make that bait look more natural. So I'm going to do the feather the line technique underneath this lily pad here, because I can't just drop right down because that pad's in the way. So I'm going to pull my jig up to the tip, get underneath that pad, and go ahead and drop the jig down. All right, pull it back up, then come out. And the main purpose for this technique is to keep you from getting hung up on vegetation. That's the sole purpose of doing this. So it's not always required, but if you want to get in some hard to reach cover, that's the way to do it. Oh man, I can't believe how peaceful it is out this morning. I cherish mornings like this when there's no one out, because it's just so rare. That's a nice looking hole right there. Sometimes you're going to find certain pockets that you're just like, oh, there's got to be a fish held up in it. Sometimes there are, but more often than not, your dreams are broken. And that's a hard fact of fishing. Just because it looks good, don't mean they're in there. All right, here's a good example of feathering the line. I want to get underneath this pad. So pulled it up to the tip, get underneath it, drop her down. Give that line a little more slack. Pull it back up, come on out. Yep. And this is what's going to happen. When you're fishing dense cover like this, you're gonna get hung up. So just mentally prepare yourself, because it's gonna happen. Ain't nothing to get bent out of shape about. Sometimes you lose your rig, sometimes you don't. That's just the way it is. So this will primarily be a swimming section here. So that's the technique that I'll be utilizing. Hole right there. There you go. Dang it. Son of a sea biscuit. He was in there too. I don't know if you guys can see all these fish splashing around here. Those are small gar feeding on stuff on the surface. And this is a little baby warmouth bass. Eeh. Yep, just a little fella. One cool thing about warmouth bass is when they hit it, I mean, they hit it like something fierce. Even them little tiny ones, man, they slam it. Oh my goodness. I saw him come up for it. He didn't make much of a fuss. Yeah. See, some of them have, I don't know if this is a parasite or what causes this. Oops. But, yeah. I'll let him go. You can see I'm just finding little openings throughout all this cover. Just bumping that jig through what I can. Ooh, yeah. Nice one. That is a nice one there. Rod situated. Yep. Yeah. That's an unHOOKum situation right there, boys. Yep, it's a real nice fish there. It's probably a 12er. Yeah, buddy. 12 ski. All day ski. Alright, gonna feather this line up so I can get underneath this pad. And if your rod is underneath a lily pad like this, you know, you can use your finger to kind of just pull it to bump it. It's the same thing as if you were using your hand to bump the rod. Swimming the jig, swimming the jig. This is how we swim the jig around this stuff. Son of a sea biscuit. Come on back now, you hear? So I just had to retie my rig. I got hung up on a tree branch, but I'm gonna go ahead and try one of these. This is the Cajun Cricket Slab Slayer 2 from Bobby Garland. Yeah, I saw these hanging in the rack and I was like, man, those look jam up. Go. Look at him. Look at him. He's hungry. He's hungry. Well, it's in pretty deep, but you know what? The unHOOKum tool makes short work of it. Yep, it's a tenor. What I'm gonna do here, got a nice opening with this little side canal. It's got good depth, so I'm gonna pull a hole and drop my jig down in it. We call this pulling holes. But the idea is, if you got deep enough water and you got some pullable cover like this dollar weed, this stuff's pretty easy to pull. Just pull you open a hole and drop your jig in there, see what happens. There he is. Although I don't think he's gonna make the cooler cut. That thing is still in pre-K. That little thing. Oh yeah, there we go. There we go. Alright, he'll keep. So as you can see here, just swimming this thing along, just like I've been doing all morning. Here we go. That's a nice fish. Just devoured. unHOOKum to the rescue. All right, where are you at? Let's see. You really swallowed this one. There we go. unHOOKum. Nice fish. Good thing he's going in the cooler because he ain't gonna make it. Another thing about vertical jigging, which seems to be difficult for a lot of people that I've had on my boat anyway, when they're first trying this out, is when they catch a fish, they automatically want to reel. Oh my goodness. And, you know, like I said, there's no reeling involved. You're flipping this fish in the boat. Another inhaler. unHOOKum. Yeah, he's a tenner. But yeah, you're... Well, now he's in the water. Yeah, you really got to be on that shoot. You can't basketball diaries that thing. That's okay. I got plenty of fish in there. It just means that fish was meant for better things, bigger things. It's all about flipping them in the boat. Vertical jigging, baby. Jig and flip. Come get that Cajun cricket, Specs. You know you wants it. You know you wants it good. Maybe I'm just... I don't even know what that was. Maybe a little bluegill. Took him for a ride though. Alright, so the wind has picked up considerably since I last turned off the camera. So now I'll primarily be swimming the jig, just so I can keep up with the current and the wind. Oh yeah, nice fish. That's a nice slabby. Oh, come on. There we go. Yeah. Swimming the jig. So don't ever think that you can't catch fish in the same area just because you've already caught them. It's all doable. Just be confident in what you're fishing with and be patient. Just like that. Doop, doop, doop. Ah, he sucked it down too. He'll keep. Alright. Let's get back over there. Come on, Cajun cricket. Catch me a big old slab in the thicket. Look at that gator just sitting there. About to get a visitor, buddy. Yeah, you slink back into the depths. Well, he's pretty good size. What is this? What are you? Little bluegilly? Yeah. Yep. Surprised I hooked you. You're so small. Little gilly? Yeah, so in these larger pad openings here, I will swim the jig a little bit. As you can see with my rod tip. Yep, that's a nice slab there. That's what I'm talking about. Talk about swallowing a freaking jig. Look at that. But this unHOOKum makes short work of any problems of getting it out of its mouth. That is a chonker, boys and girls. Chonky Magoo. Number 20. I'm going to feather this line underneath this lily pad. pocket back there. I'm gonna try. This gust of wind has other plans for me. There he is. That's a nice freaking slab. Look at that thing. Look at that fish. And of course, woofed it down just like his brethren. Straight out of the lily pads. Yep, my hook is stuck in there. Wow. My goodness. That is for sure the biggest fish of the day. Wow. So this only goes to 13. So he's every bit of with a pinch tail, let's say he's about 14 inches. That's a big old fish. He got me pretty good. Man, that's one of the nicest fish I've caught out here all spec season. Ooh, yeah, his fin got me real good. My goodness me. That was not a speck, that was probably a mudfish. I don't think I've had a left-hand fish all day. Yeah. I think that might be a male. Yep. Yeah, he's a male. And he's bleeding like a sieve already. Haven't even done anything yet. You guys can see that they are gobbling these jigs up today. Oh, he's bleeding all over the place. Get my boat all bloody. There's my left-hand fish. There we go. I think she'll keep. Yep, nice fish. Nice. Get in there. So I am headed home. I got my 25 fish limit. Didn't really need to do it today, but why not, right? You know, the vertical jigging stuff, it's pretty basic, so just get out there, start doing it. You know, that's the best way to learn, to get the experience, and to develop your own technique. So I'm gonna head back to the house. I don't think I'm gonna be cleaning fish tonight because I have been on the water for exactly, well, actually almost 13 hours. I am gonna go home and I'm gonna take a shower. I'm gonna throw some more ice on these fish and I'm gonna go back out tomorrow morning and do it again, because that's what it's all about. Alright guys, well that's about all I got for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and if you haven't considered subscribing already, please do so. It helps me out and it helps the channel grow, so I would greatly appreciate that. And other than that, that's all I got. So as always, have good times and tight lines.